Okay, I hope I'm audible to all the students who are attending this lecture of Intermediate Macroeconomics Part 2. Okay, in this lecture, we intend to start with a new model within economic growth called the solo growth model. Okay, in the last lecture of economic growth, we had looked at the Harrod-Domer model of economic growth. Okay, and if you all can recall, in the Harrod-Domer economy, the growth is primarily channelized by savings in the economy, and the growth rate of output in the Harrod-Domer model was given by S by C, where S denotes the savings rate and C denotes the capital to output ratio. Okay, now in this particular model, this is the solo model within economic growth. So let's analyze this model. Let's see how solo explains growth in the economy. Okay, so to understand that, let's first look at the basic description of the model. Okay, so the solo growth model is designed to show how the growth in capital stock, growth in labor force, and advances in technology interact in an economy, and how they affect a nation's total output of goods and services. Okay, so this model will be taking into account the growth in capital stock, growth in labor force, as well as advances in technology. And using these three particular variables, the solo model will be explaining the growth in the total output of goods and services. Okay, so guys, let's look at the basic model. Let's look at the basic solo model. Okay, so let's first talk about the supply and the production function in the solo economy. So in the solo model, the supply of goods is based on the production function, and all of us know the basic production function. The solo assumes the basic production function output Y is a function of capital K and labor L. And in the solo economy, the production function exhibits constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale means if you scale up your capital from K to ZK, and if you scale up your labor from L to ZL, your output will also scale up from Y to ZY. This means that output is increasing in the same proportion as capital and labor. So the solo model assumes the production function to have constant returns to scale. Okay, so now guys, since the production function has constant returns to scale, we have learned in the homogeneity and homotheticity lectures of mathematical methods for economics that if a function is homogeneous of degree 1, in this particular case, since the production function has constant returns to scale, it means it is homogeneous of degree 1. What does this mean? This means that you can use this particular property of homogeneity. Basically, in this particular function, if you put z as 1 upon L, if you put z as 1 upon L in this particular function, you get y by L is a function of k by L comma 1. So basically, what is Y by L? Y by L is nothing but the output per worker. K by L is nothing but the capital per worker. So guys, assumption of constant returns to scale implies what? The assumption of constant returns to scale implies that the size of the economy as measured by the number of workers does not affect the relationship between the output per worker and the capital per worker. So what this note is trying to point out, in the solo economy, production function exhibits constant returns to scale. This means if you scale up capital and labor by Z, your output is also scaled up by Z by the same proportion. And since the production function exhibits constant returns to scale, your output per worker, which is Y by L, will only depend on capital per worker, which is K by L. Output will not depend on the size of the economy. And size of the economy is captured by what? Size of the economy is captured by the number of workers. So since the production function exhibits constant returns to scale, output per worker will directly be a function of the capital per worker. The size of the labor force, which we denote by L. Number of workers is denoted by L. So the size of the economy denoted by L will not affect the relationship between the output per worker and the capital per worker. And guys, this is the case only because the production function exhibits constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale allows us to write output per worker as a function of capital per worker. So the size of the economy doesn't matter. What simply matters is that output per worker will now be a function of capital per worker. Okay, so hoping students have understood this. Now you can clearly see, let small y, so we are digging deeper into the model, let small y, which is capital Y by L, denote the output per worker. Okay, and small k, which is capital K by L, denote the capital per worker. So on our screens, we have small y and small k. Small y is output per worker, small k is capital per worker. So guys, we can now write our production function for the Solo model as output per worker is a function of the capital stock per worker. Okay, so basically this function which we had just done a few minutes back. So this function, how can I write it? What is Y by L? Small y is a function capital F of what is K by L? Small k comma 1. This is small k, guys. Okay, let me correct it. This is small k. And this I can write as small f as a function of k. So Y by L, which is small y, output per worker, is a function of capital stock per worker. So capital F of k comma 1, for simplicity, we can write as small f of k. So hoping students have understood this. So this gives us our production function in per worker terms for the Solo economy. Now guys, what does the slope of this production function tell us? Okay, so the slope of this production function shows how much extra output a worker produces when given an extra unit of capital. So basically, what will the slope tell you? If you hire one more unit of capital, how much extra output will be produced by the worker when one more unit of capital is hired? And in economic terms, this is also called marginal productivity of capital per worker, MPK. It is nothing but the marginal productivity of capital per worker. This means how much extra output one particular worker will produce if you hire one more unit of capital will be captured by MPK. You can now look at the diagram. Okay, so if we analyze the diagram, we all can see the diagram. On the horizontal axis, capital stock per worker. On the vertical axis, output per worker. Now, since we have diminishing returns, okay, that means my marginal productivity of capital is diminishing. All students should be familiar with diminishing returns to factor. Okay, it's a very famous concept we do in microeconomics. The same concept if you apply here, marginal productivity of capital stock per worker is diminishing. Okay, so you can think of it like that. Think of it like that. So in the initial phase, an average worker has too little capital. You can think of it like this: an average worker in the initial phase has too little capital. So more capital will increase the output. But in the later phase, an average worker has too much capital. When an average worker has too much capital, it becomes difficult to manage that capital. It leads to mismanagement. As a result, diminishing marginal productivity of capital sets in, which causes the output to increase, but at a decreasing rate. That is why you can see the production function is concave. The production function is concave. So I hope students have understood this. We can even read the paragraph once, which gives us a more better understanding. So in the above diagram, capital per worker is shown on the horizontal axis. Output per worker is shown on the vertical axis. You can clearly see as the amount of capital increases, the production function becomes flatter, indicating that the production function exhibits diminishing marginal product of capital. So it's the same explanation, guys, which I had given initially. When the capital stock is low, low means too little capital. Average worker only has little capital to work with. So if you give this worker more capital, this worker will produce a lot of additional output. Think about it like this, guys. Suppose I am working on only one machine. I have 24 hours in a day and I am working only on one machine. Now, my capability would go up if I am given more machines. So if only I have one machine, suppose I am given one more machine, now I can divide my time. 12 hours I can work on one machine, 12 hours I can work on another machine, and I can increase the output. So initially, when the average worker has only a little capital, giving him more capital will increase the output. But when the capital becomes very high, so you can read this line: when the capital is high enough, average worker has a lot of capital. So an extra unit increases the production only slightly. That means when an average worker is already loaded with too much capital, if you give him extra capital, it leads to mismanagement. Obviously, one person cannot manage that much high level of capital. You need more people also. So an average worker, when given too much capital, will cause the diminishing marginal productivity of capital to set in. As a result, your output will increase, but at a diminishing rate. That is why the production function is concave in the solo economy. So I hope our students have understood this diagram, and I hope students have understood the explanation as well. Okay, now guys, we have talked about the supply side, we have talked about the production function. Now let's talk about the demand side. Let's talk about the demand side now. So demand for goods and the consumption function. So in the solo economy, when we talk of demand for goods, it comes from two particular sources: demand by the households, which we call as consumption; demand by the firms, which we call as investment. Okay, so when we talk of demand for goods, demand is coming from two particular sources: households demand consumption and firms demand investment. And output per worker can be divided into two parts: consumption per worker, which is small c, and investment per worker, which is small I. So I can write output per worker is equal to the consumption per worker and investment per worker. Anyway, students, you have attended our lectures on introductory macroeconomics. You know, in general, demand comes from consumption, investment, government expenditure, and net exports. All of you are familiar with this macroeconomics identity, which we have done in the introductory macroeconomics course. Y is equal to C plus I plus G plus NX. But in the solo economy, we assume that there is no government and there is no net exports. In the solo economy, Y is only equal to C plus I. In the solo economy, Y is equal to capital C plus capital I. And if I divide both sides by L, small y will be equal to small c plus small I. If I divide both sides by L, which is the labor force. So output per worker will be equal to consumption per worker plus investment per worker. Okay, so this is our function, output function. Okay, now let's talk about what is C, what is I. Okay, so let's move forward. The solo model assumes that every year people save a fraction S of their income and consume a fraction 1 minus S. Okay, if you can recall, we had made this assumption in the Harrod-Domer model also. Every year, S fraction of the income is saved and 1 minus S fraction of the income is consumed. So guys, my consumption will be, my small c will be 1 minus S times Y. Small c, which is consumption per worker, will be 1 minus the savings rate times the output per worker, where the savings rate lies between 0 and 1. Okay, so guys, how can I write this equation? Y is equal to, what is C? C is nothing but 1 minus S times Y plus I. Y is equal to 1 minus S times Y plus I. Okay, so if I further solve this, I get I is equal to S times Y. I is equal to S times Y. When you solve this particular equation, for I, you get I as S times Y. What is it telling you guys? I stands for investment per worker. S into Y stands for savings per worker. So the above equation tells us that investment is exactly equal to savings. Okay, so I hope that students are clear till here. So the rate of savings, which is small s, is also a fraction of the output devoted to investment. All of us know, guys, in equilibrium, investment is always equal to savings. Planned investment equals planned savings. Okay, so I stands for investment per worker. Small s denotes the savings rate. When you multiply it by y, s into y is nothing but the savings. So investment is equal to savings, okay, in the solo economy. Okay, so moving forward. So what do we learn? Thus, for any capital stock per worker, the production function determines how much output the economy produces, and the savings rate S will determine how output produced is allocated between consumption and investment. This point is very important. Okay, so capital stock per worker will determine how much output will be produced in the economy, and savings rate S will determine how that output produced will be allocated between consumption and investment, because all of us know the demand is coming from two sources. One is consumption, one is investment. That means, guys, small k and small s are very important in the solo economy, because small k will decide how much output will produce, and small s will decide how that output produced will be distributed between consumption and investment. So guys, let's first talk about small k. Let's talk about the capital stock. So here comes a very important concept in the solo model: growth in the capital stock and steady state. Okay, so let's talk about what is how the capital stock grows and what is exactly meant by steady state. So from the model, you can see that there are two forces which are affecting the capital stock. One is the investment. Okay, one is the investment. What is investment causing? Investment is causing the capital stock to rise. All of us know what is investment, right? Investment refers to the expenditure on new plants, buildings, equipments, and it causes the capital stock to rise. Obviously, more investment done by the firms causes a rise in the capital stock. And then, guys, we have depreciation. What is depreciation? Depreciation refers to the wearing out of old capital, and it causes the capital stock to fall. Students in commerce and accountancy have done the concept of depreciation in depth. Okay, but in economics, depreciation simply means that your capital stock is depleting in terms of value. It's wearing out. Okay, so investment on one hand is causing the capital stock to rise. Depreciation, also called as consumption of fixed capital. Students should know this. Depreciation, also called consumption of fixed capital. Okay, this causes the capital stock to fall, because every year capital is getting depreciated. The old capital is getting depreciated. It's losing its value. Okay, so students should not get confused between depreciation and destruction of capital. Okay, destruction of capital is an abnormal situation. Suppose there's a natural calamity. A natural calamity will cause destruction of capital. Depreciation is not an abnormal situation. Depreciation is a normal situation. Every year your capital in the book of accounts will get depreciated. It will tend to lose its value. So depreciation is a regular process, whereas destruction of fixed capital might happen because of abnormal situation like natural calamities. So students should not get confused between depreciation and destruction. Okay, depreciation simply refers to your capital stock, your old capital stock, which is wearing out in terms of value. Okay, it might be in perfect condition. Your capital stock might be in perfect condition, but still it's losing its value every year. It's getting depreciated. Okay, so let's move forward. So now let's come to the equations. We had done this equation. Investment is equal to savings. I is equal to S times Y. We had done this equation, and we know that output per worker is nothing but a function of the capital stock per worker. So guys, from this equation and this equation, investment is equal to savings, S into Y. Y is a function of capital stock per worker. So from both these equations, I can write investment is equal to S times Y is nothing but F of K. Okay, so from this equation and this equation, we get this equation. So this gives us investment per worker, which is small I as a function of capital stock per worker, or it relates the existing stock of capital, which is small k, to the accumulation of new capital, which is I. So guys, small I denotes accumulation of new capital. Small k denotes existing stock of capital. So basically this function relates the new stock of capital to the existing stock of capital. It relates the new stock of capital to the existing stock of capital. Okay, so now guys, let's look at this particular concept diagrammatically. Okay, so let's look at the diagram. You can see on the horizontal axis capital stock per worker. Okay, on the vertical axis we have output per worker. The production function, you can see it's a concave production function which we have drawn. It's a concave production function. And guys, how will I draw the investment? Now, if f of k is concave, s into f of k will also be concave and it will lie below f of k. Why? Because s lies between 0 and 1. Since s lies between 0 and 1, s into f of k will have the same shape as f of k. Understand this, guys. S f of k will have the same shape and curvature and behavior as f of k. The only difference is s into f of k will be at a lower level. Why? Because savings lies between 0 and 1. It's a proportion. It's a fraction. So guys, this whole thing denotes my output. Out of this much is invested, because investment is captured by the savings curve. This is my savings curve, s into f of k. Okay, s into f of k is my savings curve, so this much is my investment. So if this whole thing is my output and this is my investment, this particular part is consumption, because we know that output per worker is equal to consumption per worker plus investment per worker. So if this whole thing is my output and this is my investment, this is my consumption. So we can clearly look at the explanation once. The above diagram illustrates that for any value of k, the amount of output is determined by the production function f of k, and the allocation of output between consumption and savings is determined by the savings rate s. Okay, so now guys, we have the depreciation rate delta. So the Solow model assumes that every year capital is getting depreciated at the rate delta. So delta is the rate of depreciation. So we assume that a certain fraction delta of the capital stock wears out each year. So delta is my depreciation rate. So guys, if I plot the depreciation line, you can see on the horizontal axis capital stock per worker, on the vertical axis delta k. If I plot the delta k line, it's going to be a straight line passing through the origin, right? And what will be the slope of this line? Slope of this line will nothing be but delta. When you plot the delta k line, how is it going to look like? You have k here, you have delta k here. It's like saying, guys, how do you plot the line y equal to mx? Y equal to mx is a straight line. It's a straight line passing through the origin. Passing through the origin. So similarly, delta k will also be a straight line passing through the origin. Delta K will also be a straight line passing through the origin. And what will be the slope of this line? So slope of y equal to mx is m. Slope of delta k will be, with respect to, if I differentiate with respect to small k, slope is nothing but delta. So I hope students have understood this particular case. Now guys, let's combine the diagrams. First, let's look onto the maths of it. So what is my change in capital stock? My change in capital stock is equal to the new capital which is added. New capital is added in the economy by the amount of investment, which is I, but some capital is wearing out every year by the amount of depreciation, which is equal to delta K. So I can say that my change in K is equal to the new capital I minus the capital which is wearing out every year given by delta K. Now, if you look at the investment function is S into f of K. We know guys, investment is equal to savings, and savings is nothing but the savings rate times the production function. So how can I write this now? I can write it like this. Change in K is equal to I is nothing but S f of K minus delta K. I can write it like this. Okay. Now let's look at the diagram. And now we are coming at a very important concept within the Solo model. So you can see guys, on the horizontal axis, capital stock per worker. Okay. On the vertical axis, we have investment and depreciation. You can see guys, the investment curve is SF of K. SF of K is my investment curve, and delta K is my depreciation line. You can clearly see now we are looking at what is meant by steady state. So this diagram will be useful in explaining you the concept of steady state as explained by Solo. So steady state is defined as that state in which your change in capital stock is equal to 0. So steady state condition is change in the capital stock per worker is equal to 0, which implies what is change in capital stock? Investment minus depreciation equal to 0, which implies your savings is exactly equal to depreciation. And where does it happen? In the diagram, it happens at the level of capital stock per worker K star. You can see guys, at K star, investment is equal to depreciation. So this is called the steady state. This is called the steady state. That means at K star, change in capital stock per worker is equal to 0. That means the new capital which is added in the economy at K star is exactly equal to the capital which is wearing out given by delta K star. I again repeat, at the capital stock per worker equal to K star, the new capital added in the economy, which is S f of K star, exactly equals the capital stock which is wearing out given by depreciation delta K star. Now you can see guys, if the economy is at a level of capital stock per worker below the steady state, suppose K1, now at K1, this is my investment, but this is my depreciation. That means at K1, investment is more than depreciation. That means the new capital added in the economy is more than the capital which is wearing out. This will cause the capital stock per worker to rise till we reach the steady state level K star. And if the economy is at the level of capital stock per worker equal to K2, at K2, the new capital which is added in the economy is less than the capital which is depreciating, wearing out. I again repeat, at K2, the new capital added in the economy is less than the capital which is wearing out. This will cause the capital stock per worker to fall till we reach the steady state level K star. So K star is called the steady state level of capital stock per worker. At the steady state, change in capital stock per worker is 0. That means the new capital added in the economy given by investment exactly equals the capital which is wearing out given by depreciation. So guys, we can quickly give a read to this. Whatever we have spoken, we can quickly look at this once. So the above diagram graphs investment and depreciation for different levels of capital stock per worker. Higher capital stock per worker implies higher output and investment. Higher capital stock per worker also implies higher depreciation. Okay. Now, the above diagram shows that there is a single capital stock K star at which investment equals depreciation. At K star, capital stock won't change because the two forces acting on it, investment and different depreciation, just balance out. So guys, we can say that delta K, which is S f of K star minus delta K star is exactly equal to 0 at K star. So K star is called the steady state level of capital. Okay, so you can, let's quickly look at the significance of steady state. You can clearly see from the explanation which I had given before as well, an economy which is not at the steady state will automatically reach the steady state. So regardless of the level of capital with which the economy begins, it will always end up with the steady state. So guys, we can say that the steady state represents the long run equilibrium of the economy. Steady state represents the long run equilibrium of the economy. Once the economy reaches the steady state, it will not deviate from there. Okay, so mechanism, I had explained the mechanism. We can quickly go over it. Mechanism is the same, which I had explained. Suppose the economy starts with the capital stock less than the steady state level of capital, which is K1 in the diagram above. You can see in that case, investment is more than depreciation, which causes the capital stock to rise till it reaches the steady state level K star. And the second point, suppose economy starts with more than the steady state level. Suppose at capital stock per worker K2 in the diagram. In that diagram, at K2, investment is less than depreciation. So that means capital is wearing out faster than what it's being replaced by investment. This causes the capital stock per worker to fall till we reach back the steady state level K star. So no matter from which level of capital stock per worker you start, you will ultimately converge to the steady state level of capital stock per worker as explained by the Solow model. Okay, so once the capital stock reaches K star, there is no pressure for the capital stock to increase or decrease. Okay, so guys, I stop here. We will start with the numerical example in the next lecture of Solow model. So I hope all students have enjoyed this lecture. Any doubt, you can unmute your mic and ask, or you can call up or mail me your doubts at divineschoolofeconomics@gmail.com. So guys, this is where I stop in this lecture.